The autumn wind sweeps over the fallen leaves, bringing unspeakable loneliness to the whole land. Under a tree not far from the Yuxin dojo in Donghai Xuanjiao village, an ordinary little boy is basking in the sun boredly, with eyes in his eyes. An unspeakable depression. The boy's name was Dong Zi, and as expected, he was a blessed man. When he came to the pirate world, he originally thought that by virtue of his foresight, he would be able to show his glory, punch Nanshan nursing home, and kick Bahai kindergarten. Oh no, it should be punching the white-bearded old man and kicking the black-bearded rebellious boy. But the reality is cruel. He has to admit that cultivation is a matter of talent. He has been in the Yuxin dojo for 2 years, and he has worked hard day and night, carrying heavy loads, and swinging his sword without losing everything. But so far, not only Kuina can't beat him, but even the new green algae can't beat him. Miserable. This has to make him sigh. Maybe he really has no talent in kendo. The day before yesterday, he was abused by Gina again in the friendly match at the dojo, which once made him doubt whether he was really inferior to a little girl. Feeling very depressed, he took advantage of this little free time and ran out of the dojo, intending to relax his depressed mood. Hey! If this goes on like this, not to mention beating up Whitebeard, I'm afraid I won't even be able to handle Red Nose in the end. Hee hee. A little purple squirrel on the tree stared at him, a hint of naughtiness flashed in its nimble eyes, so it threw the two-gnawed pine nut in its hand towards the boy. Probably because Dongs was distracted, the pine nut hit him directly between the eyebrows. In a trance, he seemed to hear a ding-dong coming from his mind. Little Li. Dong Zi was in a daze for a moment, then stood up, and a loud roar came from him, and immediately his eyes began to search among the branches, looking for the purple figure. But the little squirrel was not afraid of him, squeaked twice, and then ran away without a trace. Scanning around the fruitless boy, he shook his head helplessly, looking at the pine nuts beside him. He couldn't help laughing at himself. Really, luckily it's not the pine nuts in Monk Su Zhu's hand. If it's that heartless monk, I'm afraid I'll have to give up my life. But I don't know if it was bad luck, or misfortunes never come singly. Not long after Dongs lay down, a ripe fruit left the branch under the caress of the breeze, and fell on his forehead again. Good guy, this is not comparable to a small pine nut. Dongs was directly hit and dizzy. I don't want to. After a whirlwind, Dong Zi just wanted to curse, but suddenly, the corners of his eyes tightened, and his eyes narrowed abruptly. Dong suddenly found a line of strange characters appeared in his vision. Ironhead Skills Proficiency 20/1000. He rubbed his eyes again in disbelief, then searched again, only to find that the line of small characters was still there. Inexplicably, his heart moved, as if he had thought of something, then he looked at the big tree beside him, hesitated again and again, gritted his teeth, and slammed headfirst into it. Accompanied by a whirlwind, it took him a while to recover, but this time he had enough strength, for fear that he would not be able to verify his guess. When he looked at the row of small characters again, he grinned, with an inexplicable ecstasy in his eyes. Ironhead Skills Proficiency 21/1000. Is this my golden finger? If you can see the proficiency in cultivation or something, I won't be without rush. But it seems that I have to try the details. After some trials, he probably figured out how to use this power. Careful calculation, nothing more than 2 major uses. First, it allows you to know the details of your cultivation and divide your cultivation into each point, which is enough to make you more determined and courageous to go far. Second, the cultivation of unknown fields can be unlocked in advance. Speaking of which, it was also because of Xiao Li. Feeling the heartless Xiao Li sitting on his head, he was also a little helpless, and he didn't know what was going on. He provoked the group of monkeys deep in the back mountain, and an attack of stones was like hail same, almost didn't bury it, and I was murdered in order to save it, and now my whole body hurts. But fortunately, in the end, he also opened the foundation of knowledge, Xin Wang, and escaped with it. Now that he understands the urgency of that power, he will definitely not let him get something for nothing. He concluded that if he wants to unlock the cultivation of the unknown field in advance, there is a high probability that he will have to be beaten before he has a chance to trigger it. However, he hasn't fully understood the increase in proficiency yet. Not every operation will increase his proficiency a little, just like the proficiency of the Iron Head skill. Not adding a little more. Then he looked around, and found that under him was a green stone that was half the size of a human being. His eyes lit up, but this time he flew out with a groan before he could take any action. Dongs! You don't want to die. As soon as the words fell, the orange figure suddenly jumped over, and kicked Dongs away with one kick. Looking at the big blue stone that slid from the branch, the ground around her feet trembled slightly. Her heart was trembling, but fortunately she caught up. You idiot, do you think your head is harder than King Ganjian? Maybe it was because the little girl kicked too hard just now. Dongs didn't slow down for a while, and he was still lying on the ground in a very indecent appearance. Gina! You bastard! Female Tyrannosaurus! What did you say? Hearing this obviously sarcastic words, Kuina clenched her fists, made a creaking sound, and walked towards Dongs with a displeased face. Dongs turned around with some difficulty, looked at the somewhat fierce and cute little girl, his face tightened, and he comprehensively considered the current gap in strength between the two sides, and then said solemnly, Gina, don't get me wrong. I'm praising you for your strength. Hearing this, Kuina paused slightly. Dong's words had reached her heart. She is a girl, the only daughter of Ishin Dojo Kojiro, who wants to be recognized by her father, but because she is a girl, Kojiro doesn't like her very much. In order to achieve good results in kendo, girls need to put in more effort to make up for their inherent deficiencies. There are not many women in this world who use swords, let alone those who are outstanding in kendo. Since then, although Kuina has tried her best to deny her father's words, and wants to prove that even though she is a girl, she can also become a swordsman and a strong person at the pinnacle of swordsmanship. But in the bottom of my heart, I hated myself for being a daughter. Now hearing Dongs boasting about her strength, for her at this time, she felt very flattered. However, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. She is not stupid. Dong's tone is obviously wrong now, but now that the other party is flying more than 10 meters by her kick, she is not good at getting angry again. Hey! Didn't you just get abused by that green algae head? As for the one who came here to seek death. Seeing that Dongs tried to sit up several times but ended in failure, a blush flashed across Kuina's face, but her kick just now was a bit heavy. Hey! Are you okay? A wry smile crossed the corner of Dong's mouth. If I give you such a kick unexpectedly, will you be fine? Kuina pouted her lips, frowned, pinched her waist, and said sharply, how dare you? Dongs shook his head, and smiled helplessly. Sure enough, their brain circuits were no longer on the same channel. Give me a hand. I can't exert myself. No. But with your small body, don't compete with Chlorella in the future. That is like a bull. I'm a little stressed. If you compete with him, it's just asking for trouble. As she spoke, Kuina pulled Dongs up, feeling a little embarrassed. Soran, who entered the dojo, has already started that kind of inhumane cultivation, and he has more and more knives in his hands, from 1, to 2, and now to 3. Her vigor also became stronger and stronger, and her attacks were so fierce that even she sometimes didn't want to confront the opponent head-on, and only relied on her proficiency in sword moves to defeat the opponent from the side. History seems to be back on its established track again. The two powers in the one-hearted dojo are fighting for the front. One will die, and the other will carry the opponent's will to become the strongest. It is impossible to say where to go. Dongs. I really envy Chlorella's talent. To be honest, Soran can have such a brilliant performance in the future, and even grow to the point of Wang Lufiai's deputy, except for his indomitable and tenacious will, then he has to talk about his extremely high talent. Being able to be valued by Kojiro and Hawkeye, and to be accepted as apprentices one after another, and spare no effort to cultivate, can prove one thing in itself: Soran's own talent is very dazzling even in the entire sea. These two are not ordinary people, one is the world's #1 swordsman, and the other is a child of the Shamatsuki family from Wano country in the second half of the Great Route. From the point of view of swordsmen alone, the two of them can even be said to be the group of people who stand at the pinnacle of swordsmanship in this world. Of course, this is exactly the case, which just shows the strength of Roronoa Zoro's talent from the side. Looking at the slightly young girl in front of him, Dong sighed softly in his heart. In his opinion, the little girl who was suppressed by Soran in her youth was not much less talented than Soran, even better than Zoro in a way. Too bad it didn't grow up. Over the years, he has worshipped in Yuxin Dojo and got along with Kojiro every day, knowing that the other party is not a person who discriminates against women. So Dongs was very puzzled by his obviously purposeful attitude towards his daughter. Thinking of the usual preaching to Kuina, maybe he didn't want his daughter to embark on that road. After all, in a swordsman duel, either you die or I die. The sea is not a safe place. Even in the safest East China Sea in the world, there are always pirates, bandits, and revolutionary troops. He himself hides in the East China Sea. How can he rest assured that his daughter will go out and go out? Of course, this is also his own guess. Kuina helped Dongs up, and helped him walk slowly towards the Yuxin Dojo. In the middle of the walk, perhaps because of the wound, Dongs grinned in pain, and upon seeing this, Kuina said softly, "Hey! Dongs, are you really okay?" Dongs touched his lower ribs, and said tremblingly, "2 broken ribs, I have to lie down for 10 days and a half months." Of course, this is about the world of pirates. It may not even be good for half a year. Hearing this, Kuina blushed. The situation was urgent at the time, and she didn't even think about withdrawing her strength. You must know that Kuina is no match for some adults now. In terms of strength, she has not even lost for those adults. With such a small body, Dong Zi was suddenly hit by Kuina with all his strength. It would be no wonder if nothing happened. At this moment, Dongs and Kuina paused, and they looked at each other, and then they couldn't help but glance at the training field aside, a green algae head holding a bamboo sword in each hand, facing the wooden stake crazy offense. 1005, 1006, 1007. There are 2 stone piers on the side, which are obviously used to increase the strength of the arms. Looking at the numbers marked on them, Dongs couldn't help but twitched the corner of his mouth. He cursed secretly in his heart, "I bought a watch last year. This TM is still a person? It can't be a livestock." Of course, this green algae head is Soran. Seeing Kuina and Dongs passing by, his movements did not stop, but became a little more fierce. It seemed that the wooden stake in front of him was that Kuina who had been pressing him so hard that he couldn't lift his head. As for Dongs, of course he ignored it, because Dongs never beat him once in the usual competitions. Zoro didn't bother to pay more attention to people who were weaker than him. Although the other party's efforts were no worse than his, he didn't think the other party could catch up with his pace. But at the moment he didn't know that Dongs had awakened the bug. They all say, "Scholar farewell for 3 days, you should look at him with admiration." This sentence is not unreasonable. When he saw Wang Lufiai's deputy again, Dong Zi's eyes became very calm. After an afternoon of trying, he now has a preliminary understanding of that ability, and now he is also confident that with this ability, he will be able to catch up in the next time, even surpass everything, and stand on the pinnacle of the world. In fact, for everyone, the most difficult thing to make progress is not persistence, but perseverance as always, but you still can't see the future direction and the path under your feet. The ability he had unexpectedly awakened now made him no longer confused. All that was left was to persevere, and persevere. Seeing a trace of envy flashing in Kuina's eyes, Dong sighed softly. Gina. Such things as talent are innate, what's the use of being envious? Could it be that we are envious of the unreasonable increase in strength of this green algae head, and God also let us have his physique? Hearing Dong's words, Kuina's eyes darkened. Dong's words were right, no matter how much she envied her, she could not get a physique like Soran's. Seeing that Kuina became a little lost, Dongs didn't know what was in his mind, and he couldn't help but said, since it is destined that we cannot change, then we can only pay more, maybe only in this way can we stand out from the crowd. Besides, I don't think your talent is weaker than this green algae head. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Although the growth of girls' strength will be slower, but who said that the swordsman's competition is judged by strength? What about weak standards? Besides, why is this green algae head working so hard now? Isn't it trying to defeat you by all means? Before that, you must not be discouraged. Humph, I got it. Besides, is this girl someone who gives up so easily? Hearing Dong's words, Soran couldn't help but pause. Not bad. The corner of Clarella's mouth curled up, and then went into a crazy self-mutilation once again. On the one hand, Dong's words were to cheer up Kuina, but it also gave him an opponent who could keep improving, so that he would not lose the motivation to fight. Although he doesn't like Dongs, but the other party can cheer up Kuina, so he thinks that Dongs is still useful in the bottom of his heart. But Soran did not expect that Dongs, whom he despises today, will become the goal he will pursue and even look up to in the future. This is the impermanence of the world, who can predict it? Hey! You're back to your senses. Kuina. Okay. What are you shouting? I heard you. As she spoke, Kuina relied on her height to hold down Dong's head, rubbed it hard, and then blew the remaining 100 million points of hair on her hand as if nothing had happened, so that she could look at it from the corner of her eye. The corners of Soran's eyes twitched as he looked at the two of them. With her current self, she will definitely not be any better to the ancient Ina. Looking at the hair in Kuina's hand, he couldn't help muttering in his heart, "Maid, this female Tyrannosaurus." The sun was setting and the shadows of the two were getting longer and longer. Dongs, do you think girls in the world can't reach the top? Just like my father said, I will never be the strongest in my life. Although Dongs had said so much to her before, she was still very unconfident in her heart. Looking at the Yuxin dojo that could be blurred in front of him, Dongs hesitated again and again, remembering that Kuina had an accident because he couldn't let go of his heart, and finally he sighed softly. Hey! Kuina! I heard a few names inadvertently in the village. I heard that they are rare peak powerhouses in the sea. If you are really still confused about the future, you can ask the master. Kuina replied with some hesitation, are they all women? This time Dongs didn't explain much, but said directly, Charlotte Lingling. Crane. Jun. Amazon daughter country. Did you really hear it in the village? Gina. Girls can become the strongest, but they have to pay more. You have to firmly believe that the road is at your feet, and the future can be expected. The next day, at the Yuxin dojo, when Kuina reappeared, her energy seemed to be different. It seems that the mind has suddenly completed its transformation. Kojiro sat kneeling in the middle of the dojo, while the others were practicing the most basic swordsmanship: belt, lift, grid, strike, stab, point, collapse, stir, press, chop, cut, and wash. Recalling what happened last night, I was shocked. The Xuanjiahe family, who was born in the second half of the Great Root, is not bad in itself. It may be far behind the world's number one like Hawkeye, but it is also a figure in the ranks of great swordsmen. He had heard about those people. Charlotte Lingling, born in the Rocks Pirates, is extremely powerful, and is the overlord of the second half of the Great Root of King's Landing. His combat power is almost on par with that person. Vice Admiral, Crane. This person is even more terrifying. He is not only a person with the ability to wash fruits, but also the general staff of the navy. The other two are also people who have caused a sensation in the sea. He knows Jun. His talent in swordsmanship can be called a monster. He is well known in the circle of swordsmen at a young age. They are the new stars of the navy. As for the other one, Amazon's daughter country, he has heard it mentioned by Monkey D. Drago. It's almost fully armed. When Kuina said these names, his scalp was numb. Not only that, his whole body was also numb, and he almost got wet. But when he heard Kuina say that he just wanted to know who these people were and had never seen them before, he was relieved. Of course, as a great swordsman, Kojiro couldn't say those things against his will, so when the true colors of these people were exposed in front of Kuina, Kuina completely transformed. But afterwards, when Kojiro recalled the incident again, he slowly noticed something was wrong. Although these people are well-known figures in the sea, but in the East China Sea, the most peaceful sea area in the legend, such news is not heard at all. What Kuina said about the names she heard from the village was a lie, so after his detailed questioning, Kuina said the name that surprised him. Dongs. Kojiro didn't have much impression of Dongs. In his memory, he only knew that the child seemed to be very diligent, but there was nothing outstanding about it. He had always been quite satisfactory. Just a few days ago, he lost to Soran, who had just entered the dojo for less than a year. Dong's name was still remembered by him after losing to Soran. But this time, he could see that the other party seemed to be closer to Kuina. Others don't know what those names represent, but it doesn't mean he doesn't know. In other words, if Dongs also knows the meaning of these names, it means that this child has an extraordinary background. The round mirror reflected a bright light. When Kojiro looked at Dongs, an ordinary disciple, again, he still didn't find anything outstanding. Ordinary basic moves are dull and devoid of spirituality, and they don't have any insights of their own. Unlike Gina and Soran, both of them have their own style. Gina has taken a deft route, and this basic sword move has begun to integrate into her own style. As for Soran, she is taking a fierce route. With his talent, the future is also promising. Could it be that I was thinking wrong? Kojiro looked at the little guy in front of him and couldn't help but fell into deep thought, but what happened to those names? At the moment when Kojiro was in a trance, Dong's eyes suddenly lit up slightly. He didn't practice the 13 poses alternately like others, but only practiced the stab pose. At this moment when Kojiro was in a trance, the taste of this thorn changed in this instant. When Kojiro came back to his senses, seeing Dong's thorn, his eyes almost popped out. Impossible! How could such a thing happen? Although this time is still rigid, it is different from before. If the previous moves were extremely dull, then this sword will directly come to life now. It was like a dead object was suddenly given life. This kind of endowed spirituality is different from that of Kuina and Soran. If it is said that the basic sword moves have proficiency, the average person will not be able to improve it after practicing 10%. I will add my own style based on my own insights, and will break through this upper limit. From force, angle, breathing, mobilize which muscle of the body, or use the spine to mobilize the strength of the whole body, whether the angle is 1 degree or half a degree, whether it is left or right, plus the rhythm of breathing, constantly improve. But now, Dong's stab directly skipped the middle step and went directly to the last step. For a swordsman, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. This is the sudden transformation from a mortal to a fairy, one step to the sky, and this is why Kojiro was surprised. However, he didn't know what happened to Dong's just now. Although the proficiency can be seen, it does not increase the proficiency every time. Repeating useless exercises is tantamount to useless work for him, because the proficiency is not increased at all. This is what he noticed yesterday, so after the basic move of stabbing reached the bottleneck, he began to think about how to increase his proficiency instead of doing those meaningless exercises. Combining the knowledge he has mastered, he began to consciously adjust every swing of his sword, from breathing, angle, strength, and mentality. The blow just now was his stab to break through the bottleneck, and it was also a blow of sublimation. A person who can practice basic moves to this level in the sea can be called a swordsman. At this time, a small red character was displayed on the invisible light curtain in front of his eyes. Basic swordsmanship stab 1000/1000, but there is only this one message, and nothing else. Dong sighed softly in his heart. After several years, he finally practiced the basic sword technique stabbing to perfection. According to his speculation, perhaps in order to succeed in the future and automatically start the next stage, I am afraid that he needs to master the 13 moves one by one. But there are also so-called shortcuts. There is also a Kojiro in the dojo who can't see his cultivation level clearly. If he can put down his face and get beaten every day, he may be able to unlock the next stage of practice in advance, but he also knows that a tall building rises on the ground, the foundation is not solid, and the ground shakes. The 13 moves still need to be mastered one by one. That's good, that's why he gave up this dangerous idea. The following days will be boring brushing proficiency, but Dong Zi, who is completely devoted to brushing proficiency, doesn't seem to feel the passage of time. Become extremely sharp. However, at this moment, every style of his is still very regular. This is what other disciples see. Of course there are exceptions, and that is Kojiro. After nearly a month, he was shocked at Dong's rapid progress from the beginning, then his scalp became numb, and then he became numb. Now he no longer wants to see that kid again. Up. Why? To be honest, it's a bit shocking. It's not bad that he is in love, but the speed of his rise is too fast. If Soran is running and Kuina is riding a bicycle, then Dongs is riding a rocket. One style a day, one style of basic swordsmanship, in a very short period of time, he has practiced to perfection. It feels like a man and a woman are discussing the beauty of yin and yang, and the man is already wet before the woman takes off her clothes, which is outrageous. In the eyes of outsiders, Dongs is just mechanically wielding the knife again and again. Day after day, it feels that he has not made the slightest progress, but the real situation is quite the opposite. It is a kind of fine-tuning to a few cents. It's just the angle, breathing, and even Dong's spirit is changing. It was this kind of change that made Kojiro almost unable to sit still. In terms of practice, it is said that a slight loss is 1,000 miles away, but a slight difference is like a difference between heaven and earth. With the same practice, some people can break through the barriers and become swordsmen, while others can only do nothing and annihilate the world. The difference may be the slightest gap between them. For a swordsman who has found his own way, it is hard for him to believe that it is an apprentice who can make such fine-tuning. Still an apprentice with not much talent. Perhaps because of the discovery of Dong's secret, Kojiro Kuba's calm state of mind finally fluctuated. Looking at Dongs who had already withdrawn his sword, Kojiro couldn't help saying in his heart, maybe he can help me realize that dream. Time passed slowly, and before we knew it, 2 months had passed. During this period, Dongs used his golden fingers to quickly improve the basic swordsmanship day and night, and also used his proficiency to beat himself body of. With the help of proficiency, he can clearly know where and which muscle he has not exercised, because the proficiency of doing useless work will not increase. Slowly, he found that his strength began to show a blowout growth, and until now, he was not sure how explosive his strength was. The equipment that Soran used to train before, he now feels no pressure, and he can even handle 2 or 3 times the weight with ease. Let him laugh at himself while practicing, and become a beast himself. But it is a pity that it was never his turn in the subsequent battle practice, and I don't know if Kojiro arranged it on purpose or it was because of fate. Just like the original book, Soran ushered in his 1000th failure. Until this day, Dongs has mastered the basic swordsmanship of the 10th form, and it is not known whether it is because of the bottleneck that the 11th form is still unable to make an inch after half a month of busy work. About a week later, this situation was discovered by Kojiro, who had begun to pay attention to Tozawa. So the dramatic scene appeared again. Dongs, who was defeated by Soran 2 months ago, was once again arranged by Kojiro. Father! You clearly know that Dongs is not Soran's opponent. Kuina was able to improve by leaps and bounds during this period, and it was also thanks to the names that Dongs told her at the beginning, which made her reborn from the ashes. Now even Soran's intensive training still hasn't narrowed the gap between the two of them. And even lost to Kuina more than 1,000 times in a row. It is precisely because he knows Soran's strength that he is very puzzled and angry about the arrangement of his unreasonable father. Knowing that Dongs is not Soran's opponent, why should he humiliate him? Kojiro sighed softly as he looked at Kuina, whose little face turned bright red from confusion and anger. Gina! Have you ever heard of the saying, 3 days after a farewell, you should look at it with admiration? Kuina was taken aback when she heard the words. Although she had never heard of this sentence, it was not difficult to hear that what her father said was that Dong seemed to have become stronger, and he seemed to be able to equalize with Soran. But how is this possible? Zoro has not stopped challenging her these days. The opponent's strength can be said to change almost every day. If he hadn't secretly worked hard in private, he might have been defeated by the opponent at this moment. Even if this is the case for herself, she simply does not believe that Dongs surpassed Soran without making a sound. Seeing his daughter's expression, Kojiro's eyes became a little distant. As a swordsman, you can't let the superficial things cover your eyes, so that you can see the path under your feet clearly. Only then can you be qualified to chase the world's strongest throne. Gina, it's not just you and Zoro who have improved these days. Dongs is also advancing by leaps and bounds at a speed that you can't understand. Kuina was very puzzled, but with his talent. Speaking of this, Kojiro sighed softly in his heart. If it wasn't because of Kuina, he would not have discovered that the other party had such a talent. Many times, the bright pearl is dusty, and it can only be said that they themselves have blind eyes, and now their daughter can't see it. Come out, what can I blame myself? Let me see your strength. Can you pursue the throne of the world's #1 swordsman? Thinking of this in his heart, Kojiro's eyes suddenly lit up. Witnessing that incomprehensible leap with his own eyes, he is still amazed from time to time. One Heart Dojo, looking at Soran who only held a sword in his hand, Dongs shook his head slightly, but he also knew that the other party didn't take him seriously. Maybe he was still thinking about challenging Kuina again after defeating himself. However, he believes that this competition will be an unforgettable memory for the other party. So facing Soran's contempt, Dongs didn't say a word. Start! With a loud shout, Soran's figure sank slightly, and then rushed over like a wild boar, raised the bamboo sword in his hand and slashed at Dongs viciously. Regardless of his young age, his strength is definitely not small. Now he is comparable to ordinary adults. Dong's eyes lit up when he heard the piercing sound coming from his ears. With the help of his heart network, he had caught the traces of the bamboo sword between the lightning and the flint. He bent his legs slightly, causing the center of gravity of his body to move down slightly, and then stabbed out suddenly with the bamboo sword in his hand. This thorn is unhurried, like a stroke of magic, and the place where there is no sound is shining. Fighting is often a matter of a split second. When everyone came back to their senses, they saw a scene that made them unbelievable. When two swords strike each other, it is not the collision between the blades, but the tip of the sword against the blade. A bamboo sword stably touched the body of Soran's bamboo sword. Just like when Zoro challenged Hawkeye in the Ballady restaurant, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com was educated by Hawkeye with the knife of the cross. Now, the same situation happened to Dongs and Soran. Impossible! Seeing this situation, not only the people around couldn't believe it, but even Soran himself couldn't believe it. The fact that the person in front of him received such a violent blow from him in this way shows one thing. The strength of the opponent at this moment is far superior to his own. Now this kind of competition can no longer be called a competition, it is better to say it is an instruction, but this is accepted by the arrogant Soran. After all, the opponent was his own defeat before. But Soran is not someone who gives up easily, and Kuina has been pestered and beaten by him more than 1,000 times. So Zoro retreated a certain distance, and rushed up again, the bamboo sword slashed towards Dongs fiercely, stronger than the first time. But it's a pity that the current Dongs has been reborn, and its real combat power is no longer something that the disciples of the Yuxin Dojo can defeat. What happened next left everyone watching the battle dumbfounded. Every time the tip of the bamboo sword happened to hit the body of the bamboo sword, the sounds of ping, ping, pong, and bamboo swords clashing could be heard in the arena, but there were no surprises, and Dongs calmly blocked them all with the tip of his sword. The more everyone looked, the wider their eyes opened, and the soles of their feet began to wobble, their hearts were always jumping up and down. Damn it! Damn it! Hey! What's the situation? You said hell, I'm not a ghost, how would I know such a thing? When did Dongs become so strong? I am. Seeing the fierce collision in the field, everyone present gasped. Seeing this situation, Kuina's big eyes widened, and she looked at her father Kojiro in disbelief. Father! What the is going on? Kojiro didn't seem to hear Kuina's words, and said to Soran in a low voice, Soran, how can a swordsman duel be a fluke? Hearing Kojiro's words, Soran slowly came back to his senses. At this moment, he seemed to understand something, turned around without saying a word, took out 2 more swords from the sword basket, and made 3 swords. With Daolia's starting gesture, his eyes changed, and a sense of killing came from him. With a loud shout, Soran's figure turned into a shadow again and rushed towards Dongs. The bamboo sword in both hands slammed into Dongs fiercely with the sound of piercing through the air. The whole attack was full of rage, it didn't look like a competition of swords at all, but like a competition of stick skills. But unfortunately, it was still useless, the bamboo sword in Dong's hand was like the hand of God, once again hitting the body of the bamboo sword in Soran's hand. But this time it's not a single sword, but the intersection of 2 swords. Snapped. At this moment, Soran looked at the bamboo sword in front of him in disbelief. From the corner of his vision, he clearly saw that the bamboo sword was like a nail, nailing 7 inches of his body at once. I just want to go one step further, but there is nothing I can do. Impossible. This is impossible. It seemed that it was unbearable to bear this kind of result, a surge of anger rushed straight to Soran's forehead, and the 2 bamboo swords in his hand became afterimages. But surprisingly, each of Dong's counterattacks was an understatement, exactly falling on the intersection of the 2 or 3 swords. His attack was interrupted halfway. Seeing this scene, everyone present couldn't help being dumbfounded. Hey! I'm not dreaming. Yes, it looks like I haven't woken up yet, I'll call a second wife, I want to kill you. Where are you going to kick? Didn't that kid come from the end of the crane? The tail of the crane? You said it as if you could beat him. It can't be a ghost. Hard to say. Seeing this scene, Kuina's heart beat violently involuntarily, and a pair of big eyes stared intently at the figures in the field, motionless. The 2 people fighting in the arena are no different from the 2 people they usually see. But what is going on with the current situation? Dongs, who was easily defeated by Soran, now uses a bamboo sword to break the cognition of all of them. But these people did not include Kojiro, he knew why this happened. Father! What exactly is going on? After a while, Kuina couldn't help asking out the doubts in her heart again. Kojiro stared closely at the 2 people in the field, was silent for a moment, and said softly, now it seems that my idea is not wrong, it is the suppression of the realm. Kuina was taken aback, suppression of the realm. It wasn't that she was weird, but what Kojiro said made her completely confused. She had never heard of the topic of realm before. Before, Kojiro only told them that the division of swordsmen is that those who can cut steel are called swordsmen, and there seems to be nothing else. Now that such a sentence came suddenly, how could she understand it? Looking at Soran, who still did not give up and kept attacking fiercely, Kojiro said slowly, "Swordsmen can be divided into levels. Of course swordsmanship can also be divided into levels. In the world of swordsmen, swordsmanship is generally divided into entry, proficiency, and proficiency. Ascending the peak, returning to the basics. People present, the basic swordsmanship, Dong's realm is far beyond yours. The two of them are now competing like you taught Soran at the beginning, but Dong's swordsmanship realm is far beyond yours, reaching an unimaginable level so he can see through the flaws of Soran's every move and style, so he can easily block his attack." But there was still a word he didn't say. Watching Dong's well-timed blow, Kojiro clenched his hand, hanging on one side slightly. "In the bottom of my heart, I said, impossible." Informative and domineering. This is a move that will only be spread in the second half of the Great Voyage. How could someone use it in the East China Sea, the weakest of the four seas? Who the is he? Kuina raised her head and looked at the two contestants in the arena, and said in disbelief, "Just him." Kojiro seemed to have heard Kuina's suspicion, and said with great emotion, "If you were the current person, the situation wouldn't be much better." "Impossible, how could the gap be so big? I do not believe." "Dongs, you bastard! Are you looking down on me? Why not attack?" Soran, who had been attacking for a long time without success, looked at Dongs, who was always on the defensive, and couldn't help feeling angry. The opponent was obviously easily defeated by him not long ago, and he had never felt the shame of being overtaken by others. Seeing the firm look in Soran's eyes, Dongs replied calmly, "If that's the case, then it will be as you wish." As soon as the words fell, Dong's eyes changed, and his body retreated slightly. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com then kicked his feet suddenly, and his body shot out like a sharp arrow. The bamboo sword in his hand seemed to be given life suddenly, and every move pointed at the flaw. Soran's 3 bamboo swords were like nothing in front of Dong's. Suddenly, Dong's figure darkened, and everyone felt a flash in front of them, and then Dong's disappeared majestically from everyone's eyes. "Damn! Damn it! I don't know what to do. Where is Dong's?" In fact, it wasn't just them. Soran also had a bewildered face. His eyes kept looking around, hoping to see some clues. Up to now, he has been able to personally feel that Dong seems to be a different person, the exquisite basic swordsmanship, and the extremely sharp eyes, the 3 swords that he is proud of flow in his eyes. It's like a joke in front of you. Just as Soran was searching around to no avail, a voice suddenly came over. "Green algae head, behind you." It was Kuina's voice, but unfortunately, it was too late for this reminder. When Soran just turned around, a powerful upward attack had already attacked. Soran felt his eyes blur, his hands lighten, his palate sore, and the 3 bamboo swords were thrown flying. Soran looked at his trembling hands, his pupils trembled non-stop. His proud strength was useless in front of Dongzi. Up to now, he couldn't even hold the sword, and it was easy to put it in his hand. The bamboo sword knocked away. He looked at Dongzi in front of him, dressed loudly, with a hint of disbelief in his eyes. He actually lost, and he lost so without any suspense. After a long silence, Soran said firmly, "Dongs, I will come again." This battle has finally come to an end. Although the fight did not have those gorgeous and earth-shattering moves, it taught the people present a real lesson on the ground. The frog at the bottom of the well got a glimpse of the wider world outside today. However, this battle is not without disadvantages, that is, since then, Dongs has been entangled by Kuina and Zoro, and the endless competition has begun. Kuina and Zoro will find Dongs twice a day to compete. At the beginning, Kuina didn't believe her father Koshiro's words, but when she really met this familiar playmate, she realized how much Soran felt back then, and how aggrieved she was. Because of Kuina and Zoro, Dongs had to take a break and slowed down the practice of the 13 basic sword techniques, but it was a blessing in disguise and accidentally broke through all the basic sword techniques of the 13 styles. When the proficiency of the basic swordsmanship of the 13th form reaches 1000/1000, the words of the basic swordsmanship become the basic swordsmanship EXP. The latter is what he predicted in his heart. A line of small, slightly dimmed characters. Swordplay, unlocked. Fencing. Dongs walked around in place, thinking about the meaning of his golden finger in his heart. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, as if he had thought of something. Then Dongs held the sword in his right hand, together with the index finger and of his left hand, and gently pressed against Zhu Jianjian. Then, the bamboo sword shot out, and suddenly there was a breeze, the ink rain came, and the black dragon came out, the bamboo sword flashed a brilliance, and Dongs moved with the sword, all in one go. Of course, this was just his imagination, and the real situation was that he threw out a bamboo sword with all his strength. That's right, it is the ultimate skill in vertical and horizontal swordsmanship, 100-step flying sword. Seeing the bamboo sword shattered into fragments in front of him, Dongs touched his head in embarrassment, and said to himself, I'm a bit stupefied after all. Just when Dong's interest was fading, a line of small characters suddenly appeared in front of his eyes, which made him stunned. Swordsmanship 100-step flying sword proficiency 1/10,000. The sudden surprise made Dongs almost cry out. In that case, Dongzi licked the corner of his mouth, his eyes were full of light. But things are not as good as he imagined, just like the horizontal swordsmanship in vertical and horizontal swordsmanship, which traverses all directions. With Dong's current state, even simple moves can't do it. After all, that thing has 8 sword chi, and it's too big for him who has just practiced basic sword skills, and it's easy to mess up. After a lot of fishing, he only got the 3-style sword skill in the end. One is called 100-step flying sword, the second is drawing the sword, the third is Tai Chi sword. Hey! What are you two doing here? Dongs was struggling, and accidentally found the figures of Soran and Kuina. Seeing that the proficiency of the Iron Head skills no longer increased to 950/1000 in front of him, Dongs stopped. Soran and Kuina stood aside, their eyes almost popping out. Hey! Man, am I dazzled? How could I lose to a fool? Relying on her height advantage at this moment, Kuina slammed Soran's head hard. Green algae head, your skin is itchy again, isn't it? Asshole! You're the one with itchy skin, I can definitely defeat you today. Soran's current temperament is like a firecracker, it explodes at any point, especially in front of Kuina. Every time Kuina picks it up, it explodes. Seeing the two people pointing needles at Maimeng, Dongs was a little speechless. Hey! I said, what are you two doing here? Perhaps it was because Dongs interrupted at the wrong time. Kuina and Soran turned around at the same time when they heard the words, and shouted in unison, shut up! For these two people, Dongs can't bear it until now. MD, retarded. Bastard, who are you talking about? The two spoke in unison again. Hey! Dongs, what are you doing? Hey, are you crazy? Seeing the expressions of the two looking foolish, Dongs couldn't help twitching the corners of his mouth. Am I mentally retarded? It seems that I need to relax my muscles and bones today. Kuina and Zoro smiled awkwardly, then what are you doing? After a moment of silence, Dongs said, take your body. If you want to really learn how to fight, you must first learn how to be beaten. Things are divided into yin and yang, offensive and defensive poles. If you don't have a physique that can never be killed in 100 battles, even if you have the ability to sever your throat with one blade, you may only have the power of one blow. I think you don't want your future to be like this either. But this is too much. Hey, Dongs, are you sure it's not self-harm? Even though what Dongs said was so high-sounding, Kuina and Soran were not fools. They didn't believe that this training method, which was obviously prone to self-harm, was tormenting the body. Dongs felt a little embarrassed. Although his purpose was to get fit, those operations did make him feel a little ashamed. However, he didn't admit it, but continued to talk about him, hoping to bring this matter to the past. Fool! For him who is familiar with the plot, isn't it just Max at the beginning? It's the most difficult thing to do, so you can take the most dangerous. If you don't have the guts, then your so-called ambition is nothing more than that. Hearing Dong's words, Kuina and Soran couldn't help but blushed. With the continuous advancement of Dong's proficiency, his strength also began to develop in the direction of monsters. Every move has the power of 9 bulls and 2 tigers. In the previous challenge duel, the reason why Kuina lost in 2 moves was because her strength was crushed. You must know that the strength she has now is no less than that of an adult man. Even so, she can't stop Dong's second. It's not just her, even Soran, it's hard for him to receive a sword move with that kind of power. Okay. You have big fists, you are right. In this regard, the two did not get overly entangled. After all, the two of them tied together are not Dong's opponents now. Father told you to come over. After a moment of silence, Kuina suddenly said. Dongs was taken aback, since he had perfected his basic swordsmanship, he hadn't been to the dojo for some time, and Kojiro turned a blind eye to this. He didn't expect Kojiro to see him today. What's the matter? Kuyuna shook her head. You reading www.yuyuganshu.com? I don't know, my father didn't tell me. Dongs narrowed his eyes, his thoughts turned twice in his mind, and he was focused on the dojo. Probably only Kojiro Shimatsuki could see through his own realm. Now that he is telling himself to go there, he should be aware of his bottleneck. He guessed whether this trip was a blessing or a curse. Yo! Dongs! You're here! Meet the master! Ashamed! I haven't even taught you anything real until now. What's the matter? If you hadn't taken me in back then, I'm afraid I wouldn't be the person I am now. Dong's words are true. When he just woke up, a group of bandits came to Xuanjia village to rob him. At that time, he was powerless and almost died tragically under the knives of those bandits. Fortunately, Kojiro's shot drove them away, and took him in. You are now in a state where you can take revenge. Dongs narrowed his eyes. You mean? Swords are inherently murderous weapons. If you want to go further, simple practice is far from enough. Dongs was silent when he heard the words, and he said after a long time, so that's the case. No wonder. It is not without reason that he has been improving the proficiency of the Iron Head skill before, because since the 3-style swordsmanship is unlocked, no matter how he adjusts it, the proficiency will not increase at all. Now he heard Kojiro's explanation. Feeling what the other party said was good, how the effect of swordsmanship really needs to be verified in actual combat. Then Dongs borrowed a sword from Kojiro, and left with firm steps. Facing the setting sun, Dongs murmured to himself in a slightly low voice, "A bandit. Release the lottery today, and send you to Huangchuan. East China Sea, Frost Moon Village." One after another smoke rose, and the warmth permeated the small village again. Reflecting the setting sun, a not tall figure, with a long sword slung across his waist, stood on the branch of a towering giant tree, looking at the bandit's lair not far away. He slowly drew out the long sword at his waist, and lightly brushed the spine of the sword with his fingers, but this sword is more like a knife than a sword, because it is single-edged. According to Kojiro, it is called Hedeo Yuan. It is the blade of the contract in the original work. The big sharp knife with 21 gongs, the blade and scabbard are all white, and the length is about 88 centimeters. Although he has been exercising this year, this knife is still a bit long for him, but fortunately it does not hinder his normal use. He is about the same age as Kuina, 2 years older than Soran. He is about 11 years old this year. Because of years of training, he is about 1.6 meters tall, so this knife is just for him. Slightly longer. However, it was enough to deal with those bandits, and he, who was knowledgeable, soon had a full view of the bandits' lair. Should it be called the East China Sea? Among the 4 seas, only the East China Sea is the weakest. It doesn't even have a decent big pirate. It is a sea area that symbolizes peace. Still worthy of garp, a pair of iron fists plowed the entire East China Sea, and pirates became rare items. There are a total of 127 people in the entire bandit nest, most of them are young and strong men, and there are only a few scattered women, but they don't seem to be good. Dongs guessed that these women were probably snatched back by these bandits. It's nothing but spoils. In troubled times, the weak have no right to choose at all. Thinking of all kinds of things in this world, Dong sighed softly. There is only one gun in the bandit lair, and the rest are knives. The only gun is in the hands of the bandit king. Presumably it was just a way for him to control the people under him. After all, it is self-evident that cold weapons and hot weapons are stronger when people themselves are very weak. Ugh! A long sigh drifted away with the sound of the wind, and Dong slid down from the tree under the dim light, took a breath, and quietly walked towards the bandits' lair. It is built on the mountain, although it is a bit crude, but it is backed by the mountain, easy to defend but difficult to attack. It's a pity that these bandits have been pampered all these years, and they have lost their vigilance. There is no one on the sentry post, so Dongs easily touched them. This also shows the serenity and peace of the East China Sea from the side. But today the place is going to be stained with blood. There were a lot of bandits, and Dongs didn't intend to confront them head-on, and he wasn't the kind of person who would just ignore them if he got hot-blooded. One person versus 127 people, it's better to be more cautious. Although there will definitely be a hand-to-hand battle in the end, the chances of capsizing in the gutter will be much lower. So Dongs found a corner, quietly waiting for the sunset, waiting for the night to come. Soon, the sun fell below the horizon, and night enveloped the entire island. Dongs stood up quietly, stretched his somewhat stiff limbs, and planned to start advancing his plan. At this moment, Dongs narrowed his eyes, and 2 voices came from his ears. The 2 drunken people were chatting about nasty things, and they swayed here and there. The content is basically that he brags that he feels good again. How mighty I was before. 3 feet away from the wind or something. Listening to the conversation between the 2, Dong Zi narrowed his eyes, showing a bit of murderous intent, and he probably guessed what they said. The long knife was unsheathed, and the sound of sliding the blade and the scabbard made the 2 people not far in front of them numb. They were all too familiar with this sound. Who's there? The 2 of them didn't think about that. After all, no one had resisted them for such a long time. It's a pity that they miscalculated this time. It was not a voice that answered them, but a rustling sword light. An arc-shaped light flashed in front of the 2 people's eyes, and then there was darkness in front of them, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Under the avalanche, not a single snowflake is innocent. Tonight seems destined to be a sleepless night. Seeing these 2 people, Dong's eyes suddenly became a little cold. Although he knew that the world was a bit chaotic, seeing it with his own eyes was another matter. Due to the darkness, Dong Zi didn't notice that on the light curtain in front of his eyes, there was a line of small dim words. The proficiency of sword drawing has quietly changed from 1/10,000 at the beginning to 21/10,000. The night is getting darker. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Dong's figure quietly disappeared into the darkness, and a silent killing kicked off. Dongs once again took the head of the bandit, but he sighed softly. There are fewer and fewer people left alone, and most of the rest are gathered together, so it is not easy not to alarm others. But now he has sent away more than half of the people in this bandit lair, and the pressure on the rest of the people has been reduced by more than half. This scream broke the silence of the night, but it did not prevent Dongs from attacking again. Before the bandits recovered their senses, Dongs killed some people again. Of course, it also includes the only bandit king with a gun. He hasn't mastered the weaponry yet, and he hasn't eaten a devil fruit. For him now, hot weapons are the biggest threat, so after knowing that he can't continue to fight, he must first deal with the person who threatens him the most. Although the Bandit King is said to be the leader of these bandits, his actual combat power is not much higher than those ordinary bandits. After all, he is just a leader who still needs a gun to consolidate his position. But this also saves him a lot of trouble. If he is on the Great Route at the moment, not to mention the bandits, even the common people will have guns and ammunition. As for the reason, it is naturally for self-defense. Not only is the weather extremely bad on the Great Route, but it is also a carnival place for pirates, so it is not surprising that it is the case. If there were more than 50 guns here, then he would definitely play in a different way. After finally awakening Goldfinger, he would not let himself fall into irreparable danger. At this moment, it is fortunate that there is only one gun in the bandit's lair, which makes his revenge a lot easier. Second Master. Boss, dead. A terrified cry spread throughout the compound, causing the rest of the bandits to start to tremble. Normally, the king of bandits has a lot of power, but now even the boss has been killed, so why not let them be afraid? The crowd suddenly seemed to explode, and there was a commotion. At this moment, a tall figure came out. This person had a hideous face, a scar almost ran through his entire face, and there was a murderous look on his unshaven face. The clothes on his chest were also open in all directions, and 2 huge scars crossed across his abdomen. Holding a mace in his hand, his eyes showed a trace of madness. "Shut up for me!" The berserk momentum swept across the audience, causing the remaining young people around to be silent. "Who knows what happened?" explained to Lao Tzu. "It's a pity that these little guys also woke up from their sleep. They didn't know what happened. There were only corpses all over the ground and the pungent smell in front of them." Seeing that there was no movement around, this person couldn't help squinting his eyes, and looked around. It is actually easy to think that such a thing happened. They are bandits, and they are rampant and domineering on weekdays. It can be said that they are burning, killing, looting and committing all kinds of crimes. If someone comes to do justice for this guy today, he will not be surprised. But until now, he hadn't found out where the assailant was, which made him a little upset. Before people saw it, most of the people in this village died, and the boss also died. You must know that the Thief King brought the gun that was enough to compete with him, and the Thief King was killed in front of him without making a sound. Doesn't that mean that the opponent also has the strength to kill him? After a while, the surroundings were still quiet. The man slammed the mace in his hand on the ground and shouted, "Get out of here, you scum! Let me talk about it again. Where is Dongs at this time?" It turned out that after a lot of killings, Dongs unexpectedly discovered that the proficiency of the sword-drawing skill he had unlocked began to skyrocket. Up to now, the proficiency has reached 501/10,000. With the skyrocketing proficiency, he can feel the power of swordsmanship multiplying at a leaping speed. That's why he was able to decapitate Bandit Wang Xiao with a single blow. After all, there were 9 people in that hall. Right now, he was standing in a corner of a room comprehending the essence of sword drawing. As for the scene outside, he had seen it, but at this moment, he was not in a hurry to get down, but looked at the gun in his hand. This gun is not an ordinary gun, but a sniper rifle. Thinking that the Bandit King can restrain these 100 or so people with a single gun, he should be a sniper, otherwise he would have been killed with a single gun. These lunatics who are licking blood cannot be restrained. Then he picked up his gun and aimed at the bandits in the compound. Boom! A loud gunshot was particularly piercing in the silent compound at this time, and a minion's head was blown out of the crowd. Panic struck the bandits again, and the crowd became uncontrollably agitated. The surroundings were still quiet, and the pitch-black night was like a giant beast devouring people to them. Unknown threats, deadly killing intent. As time went by, the pressure on them increased, and finally some people couldn't help but began to collapse. I'll be killed. Help! Run! Shut up for me! There was another violent shout, but unfortunately, this time it didn't have any effect. The nerves of the bandits had already collapsed because of the invisible enemy. Who the hell? Get out of here, you scum! Boom! He was answered by another shot. Then another bandit fell to the ground. The gunshot slapped Erdongjia's face like a slap in the face, making him go crazy too. Ah boy! I don't care who you are, I will kill you with my own hands today. Then his voice became vicious, and he said to the people around him, you guys, go and bring those stinky to me. Looking at the reedied second master, the young men felt as if they had eaten a piece of ice in the cold winter, and they couldn't help shivering, which made them recover from their fear in an instant. Several people swallowed 2 mouthfuls of saliva one after another, and said tremblingly, yes. The Erdongjia's voice was so loud that not only the little ones heard it, but even dongs in the distance heard it. With a sudden change of mind, Dong Zi understood what the other party wanted to do in an instant. The other party seemed to be at the end of his rope, so he planned to use those hostages to force him to come out. It's a good idea, but do you think it will work? Bang bang bang! Continuous gunshots rang out, and those young men who were just about to step forward to catch the hostages were killed instantly. In front of Dong Zi, who had mastered the knowledge, the sound of gunshots was like the horn of death, and every shot was fired without fail. After that, dongs didn't stop and started to shoot crazily. In just a few minutes, there was no one standing in the courtyard except the second master. In the end, he tried to shoot at the second master, but the result was as he expected, the other party didn't care at all. I saw his body suddenly swell, the clothes on his body were torn, and a black-skinned gorilla stood in place. Then he dodged the blow with a kind of agility that didn't match his body shape, then jumped up and went straight to the room where Dong Zi was. Those who can. Immediately, Dong Zi's face darkened. Although he had expected that this guy would be difficult to deal with, he didn't expect to meet a capable person here. Devil fruit is known as the secret treasure of the sea, which can bestow different abilities on the user. It is divided into Natural Department, Superhuman Department, Animal Department, UU reading www.uuganshu.com. These abilities are strong or weak. The strong ones are like natural disasters, like frozen fruit, magma fruit, sparkling fruit, thundering fruit, they are like walking natural disasters. Superman type, regular type devil fruits such as Zhen fruit have infinite potential. There are also giant Buddhas of animal type phantom beasts, blue dragons, etc., all of which are like the domain of gods. Once again, the first class is the general animal devil fruit, but those capable people also have advantages that ordinary people can't match. Just like the orangutan fruit ability user that Dongs met now, he also has resilience that ordinary people can't match. Boy! I found you! A voice full of murderous intent and anger came from the gorilla, and then the mace slammed towards the room where Dong Zi was. Seeing this, Dongs dropped the gun in his hand, then tapped his toes lightly on the ground, and the whole person burst out. Then 3 steps into 2 steps, the whole person ran out of the room, drew his long knife out of its sheath, and carefully looked at the enemy in front of him. Sensing that Dongs had withdrawn from the room, Erdong also jumped down from the 2nd floor of the cottage. What? Bastard! Don't keep hiding! This sentence is full of anger, even if it is behind his back, Dongs can feel the other party's anger. But Dongs didn't take it to heart. Fortunately, he was cautious enough just now. If he was really passionate, and felt that he could fight openly and squarely as soon as he came up, then he might capsize in the gutter. I met a capable person in such a bandit lair. When the second master stood up, turned around, and looked at the person in front of him. A trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. It's actually a brat. Little devil! Who are you? Report your name. The two stood still, with a huge difference in body size. The height of the other party was nearly 3.5 meters. In terms of the current Dongs, he must be a brat. Dongs didn't move his eyes, and replied in a cold tone, "The person who killed you." The second master laughed when he heard Dong's words. "Only by you. I don't know how many little brats like you have been crushed to death. This is the first time I've heard such crazy words today. It's really shameless. Boy! Let me die." The huge mace seemed weightless in the hands of the second leader, and he swung it at an exaggerated speed, sweeping away thousands of troops in one stroke, whipping up a bitter wind, and pressing towards Dongs. Regarding this situation, Dongs was not afraid, and had a sense of knowledge, which was his confidence to stay. Thre color domineering, armed color, knowledge colored, and domineering colored. The armed color can enhance the domineering power of one's own defense and attack power, and can capture the flowing body of nature. The color of knowledge can sharpen the five senses, and can detect the breath of surrounding creatures, the domineering changes in emotions, and can also be used to predict and avoid danger. Overlord color, the rarest, the dominant aura of the chosen one who is said to be possessed by only one person among millions of people, is to have the qualification of king to stand above others. It cannot be acquired through exercise, nor can it be inherited. It can only be determined by one's own fate, and even if the overlord color can be controlled freely, it cannot be strengthened by exercise, only by the growth of the user himself. Can be strengthened. Although it seems to be the least knowledgeable, it is also an earth-shattering and powerful force for the Great Root, and for the East China Sea. Seeing the mace coming at him, Dong's eyes lit up, he twisted his heels, and his body slid back 1.2 meters, the mace flew past his nose, narrowly dodging the attack. What? The Erdongjia didn't seem to expect that the brat in front of him could escape such a swift blow from him. He, who was a little unbelieving, followed up with another blow. This time it was faster than the last time, and the sound of a sonic boom could be vaguely heard, but it was a pity that this blow missed again. Seeing this situation, the second leader seemed to be enraged, and the speed of the mace became faster and stronger, as if he wanted to smash the person in front of him into a pulp. After the animal fruit is transformed into an animal, not only the body will change, but also the mind will be affected, just like the current one, who is irritable and likes to use brute force to solve problems when encountering problems. Seeing this, Dongs did not make a move, but was slowly adapting to this rhythm. Kong Long has regrets, and it will not last long. This is the law of heaven. After some venting attacks, the speed of the second leader gradually slowed down. After realizing this, Dongs tightened the long knife in his hand. A burst of silver light burst, and a full moon arc swept out suddenly. The second leader was startled. He was used to Dongs avoiding all the time. He thought that the kid in front of him had no room to fight back. Unexpectedly, the opponent's attack was so swift and fierce, as fast as thunder, and as fast as lightning. This move is exactly the sword drawing technique, and the sword drawing technique pays attention to killing with one blow, and the pursuit is a quick one. Dongs has never made a move before, and it can be regarded as accumulating momentum, and this strike at this time is far beyond the previous level. However, after this blow, Dongs didn't stop, but jumped away quickly, distanced himself from the opponent. This knife felt a little wrong to him, and he could feel a strong resistance. It's so hard. As if he heard Dong Zi's self-talk, a trace of cruelty appeared on the face of the second master. Haha! I am a chimpanzee who ate a chimpanzee devil fruit. This kind of attack is like giving me a tickle. If you keep it for a long time, you will lose. I am not afraid of your attack at all, but if you take my attack, you will win. We'll see the outcome. Don't try to escape today, I will eat you alive later. Hearing the other party's words, Dong Ziyi's eyes turned cold again, with murderous intent overflowing. In troubled times, it is a tragedy in the world, and he did not expect that the person in front of him would have such insane behavior. At this moment, Dong suddenly squinted his eyes, and his proficiency in drawing swords on the light curtain in front of him suddenly jumped up by 50 points, and the proficiency reached 551/10,000. Looking at the chimpanzee in front of him, Dongs couldn't help but he flicked the corner of his mouth. For him, the person in front of him is not only his enemy, but also his tool. That's right, a tool for brushing proficiency. It can be called a tool man. And so far, he has met the best tool man, and he has gained 50 points in one blow. Hee. You sure? Dong smiled coldly. You must know that what he is holding in his hand is not an ordinary sword, but a big sharp knife, 21 knives, a famous knife in this world that is rarer than a devil fruit. Self ha ha, ha 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 ha. In response to Dong's rhetorical question, the second leader laughed arrogantly. Die. Dongs, who has adapted to the rhythm of the second master, has already started to fight back at this time, and the arcs of light become bigger and bigger, and the arc changes from a waning moon to a full moon. At the same time, the knife in Dong's hand became more and more stable, and the meaning of drawing the sword became more and more full. Until this sword, the arc light was full, the night was dark, and the two moons appeared together, and a scream came. There was a deep bone wound on Dongjia's chest, and blood was everywhere. Impossible. The chimpanzee in front of him simply couldn't understand how the kid in front of him could break through the defense. The same move, which didn't hurt or itch to him before, suddenly. However, Dongs was not surprised by this knife, because in his field of vision, the proficiency of sword drawing has reached 5,000/10,000. What kind of sword are you practicing? Go home, wash, and sleep. Then Dongs beat the dog in the water with a stick. He knew that the animal department has always been rough-skinned and thick-skinned, and its resilience is extremely amazing. Although the opponent's injury is not serious now, it may recover after a while. Seemingly knowing that the little ghost in front of him was not easy to mess with, the second leader rolled his eyes and planned to retreat. Little devil! I take back what I said before, you can indeed hurt me, but I am an animal, and your endurance is not comparable to that of a little devil like you. How about we stop now and live in peace? Dongs heard the words and ignored them. He knew that if he played with his mind, he would never be the opponent of the old oily man in front of him. If you say too much and make mistakes, silence is golden. So Dongs did not stop, but continued to attack fiercely as always, and his proficiency in drawing swords was also increasing rapidly. Cold murder. Dangjia had a few more injuries on his body. Seeing the little ghost in front of him ignore his words, he felt a little bit of hatred in his heart. Originally, he wanted to sound out the other party's tone, so as to judge whether he should leave or stay. If the opponent stops, but he won't leave, and the opponent will stop, it means that the opponent's physical strength is not much, and I can use the advantage of the animal department to consume him to death. If the other party responds, he will not stop. He can also use words to disturb the other party's heart and take the opportunity to escape. Whoever thought that they would run into such a person without saying anything? Looking at the arc of the full moon in midair, his heart began to tremble, unless he could block it, otherwise, it would be a deep wound with bone visible. Suddenly Dongs frowned. He found that his proficiency in drawing swords had reached 8,500/10,000, and then it would not increase any more. This made him a little confused. But soon, he had a new choice, and then his eyes changed, and he threw out the word Hideo. Seeing this situation, the second master was taken aback for a moment, and then overjoyed. He licked the corner of his mouth a bit bloodthirstily. If the other party had no weapons, then he would let himself decide. But before he finished being happy, he was suddenly startled, because Hideyi's writing speed was too fast, so fast that he couldn't understand it. Even if he swung the mace with all his strength, he still couldn't reach this speed. And the little ghost held the hilt of the sword with his right hand, and flew towards the knife immediately after. He subconsciously wanted to swing the mace in his hand. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com wanted to interrupt the opponent's attack, but the closer the long knife was to him, the faster the speed, and the more nervous he felt. In the end, there was only a little coldness left in his vision, and at this moment he found that he seemed unable to move. Damn! What kind of sword move is this? Afterwards, he only felt a chill in his throat, and the strength in his body was slowly drawn away. Impossible! This move is nothing else, it is the second sword technique unlocked by Dongs, the ultimate move of vertical sword technique, the 100-step flying sword. Immediately afterwards, another full moon suddenly appeared, and the head of a chimpanzee flew high. Then Dongs put the sword back into its sheath, feeling a little emotional in his heart. Although the 100-step flying sword is the most powerful move in vertical swordsmanship, his proficiency has not improved, so that he had to make up another sword drawing technique, and then he defeated the second master. Beheaded. After the battle, Dong seemed to be out of strength, and sat down on the ground, performing advanced swordsmanship with high intensity and overloading, even he couldn't bear it. He leaned against a big rock and breathed the air wantonly. Looking at the bright moon in the sky, he said in a low voice in his heart, 4 years, 5 months, and 6 days, this journey of revenge is over. Then he slowly looked at the proficiency status on the panel. Sword drawing 8500/10,000 100 steps flying sword 1500/10,000 Tai Chi sword 150/10,000 unlock the lottery today, and send you to Huangchuan. But in the blink of an eye, Dong's pupils suddenly shrank. This is... At the foot of the mountain, a man with round glasses sighed a long time, then turned around and walked into the thick night with a twist of his mouth. When the sun rose on a new day, Dongs walked back from the bandit's nest on the first ray of sunlight before dawn. Master, I will return the sword. Nah. I'm back. I forgot to tell you before I left, there is an ability user who came from the West Sea. Hearing Kojiro's words, Dongs couldn't help frowning. The other party's gloating tone really wanted to beat him up. Since you forgot, don't say it. But at this time, the old matter is brought up again, this person in front of him is really a sword man. Dongs weighed the combat power of the two at this time, and with great difficulty suppressed the thought of pressing the opponent on the ground and rubbing back and forth. But Lao Tzu can't beat him, and there are younger ones, she can easily ravage her. Today he plans to teach Kuina a lesson. Of course, he would not say these little thoughts in a foolish manner. Fortunately, thanks to the master's usual teachings, the disciple was able to retreat unscathed. Not to mention, what Dong said was very good. As soon as the words came out, Kojiro couldn't help but see a hint of embarrassment on his face. If the other party was really taught by him, he would only be relieved, but in fact, he didn't teach the other party much, and this sentence that seemed to be a compliment made him feel extremely uncomfortable. The 13-style basic swordsmanship is the stuff of the bad street. In the larger cities of Donghai, there are more than a dozen different versions in bookstores. As for swordsmanship and domineering, he never taught these apprentices at all. Kojiro pretended not to understand Dong's words, and immediately changed the subject. How do you feel, Shan Bandit Village and his party? Dongs laughed. He said meaningfully, it's okay. Although there is nothing wrong, I still have to say, thank you. Kojiro narrowed his eyes, and thought to himself, he really saw me. What a terrifying sight. Where? It's just doing my duty. By the way, can I ask for your advice after a while? Kojiro was a little surprised when he heard Dong's words. Although the opponent's current combat power far exceeds that of the students in the dojo, it is too early to fight him. He is also a great swordsman. Although he is not as good as Hawkeye, he is not a beginner. The kid who sees the way of the sword can compete. Dongs, as a swordsman, you should know the gap between us. This gap cannot be bridged by 1 or 2 moves of swordsmanship. Dong Ziyi shrugged, don't get me wrong. I'm talking about forging technology, and if it's about swordsmanship, I'm afraid it will take a few years before I'm qualified to fight with you. Before all these words fell to the ground, Kojiro's pupils trembled slightly, and an extremely terrifying aura instantly locked Dong's. Kojiro became more and more curious about this little guy in front of him. This matter involves secrets, how did he get it? Known. Kojiro was born in the Shimotsuki family of Wano country, and he came to the East China Sea to seek refuge from Wano country because of a certain incident. He still knew about this matter from his fathers, and he never made it public. His father Shimotsuki Kozaburo was not only a swordsman, but also a master swordsmith. Hideo Yi characters were forged by his father himself. Little guy. Can you tell me who you really are? Feeling the aura pressing on his body, Dong's expression froze, but he knew that it was the right choice for him to get straight to the point, because there was no suitable weapon for him in this world. According to his own idea, the weapon he will use to practice swordsmanship in the future is a sword, not a knife. That is to say, the supreme big knives of the 12 crafts in the sea, the big fast knives of the 21 crafts, and the 50 crafted good fast knives, none of them are their own dishes. In order to truly exert one's combat power, one also needs to forge one's own weapons. But the skill of casting swords cannot be entered without anyone leading the way. It is different from ordinary blacksmithing. It is more demanding and requires stronger skills. Kozaburo is a world-class swordsmith master. Even if Kojiro did not inherit the skill of swordsmithing, the swordsmithing experience left by the other party is enough to let him light up the skill of swordsmithing. With such convenience, how could he be far away? Woolen cloth. Me. It's better to say everyone who studies in the dojo. It's just an ant in a troubled world. Want to pursue the seeker with the strongest swordsmanship. Of course, he is also a student of Yuxin Dojo, Dong's. After a moment of silence, Kojiro put away his aura. Dong's gaze was so pure that he didn't dodge the slightest bit. Facing a great swordsman, those little thoughts would only be self-defeating. So Dong's told the truth this time, and didn't want to hide his thoughts. Hee. Great ambition. 3 days later, you come to find me. I don't know how to forge swords, but my father left some books and there is also a sword-making workshop. I will lend you for the time being. Dong said sincerely, thank you, Master. Hearing Dong's words, Kojiro's mouth twitched, I'm chatting with you today, only this sentence sounds the best to my ears. Ha 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 ha. By the way, the old man will meet an important guest in a while. He likes geniuses very much. Would you like to meet him? Dong's narrowed his eyes. He was probably the only one who came to visit Yuxin's dojo at this time and was treated solemnly by Kojiro. But what? Now is probably not the time. In this world, force is the most important thing. If you don't have the fighting power to set the world, even if you have a sharp blade in your heart, it may not help you. So Dongs waved his hand and left. What a funny little guy. The sun is getting higher and higher, and there are more and more people in the dojo. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com started a day of practice. For the students in the dojo, Kojiro is not too concerned, everyone has a strong talent. If everyone is weak, if he tries his best to teach everyone, time will not allow it. But after turning around, he didn't find Soran and Gina either. So he asked the students around him, and learned that Kuina was called by Kojiro, but Soran didn't return all night. Thinking of Soran's hard work in practice, Dongs also guessed where the other party was. It's probably around lunchtime, maybe I won't see him. But at this time, Kojiro asked Kuina to go over, and he was a little confused. With Kojiro's temperament, Kuina almost got him banned directly, and Dongs didn't even think about letting her join the Revolutionary Army. Somewhat doubtful, he inadvertently slipped to the side of a big tree, and jumped onto the trunk while no one was paying attention. Feeling the quality of the flesh, Dongs was extremely moved. Probably only this world can train such a tyrannical body. This is just a simple exercise, not to mention those strong physical skills, and the bonus of devil fruit. Simply put, they are human beings, and they are a group of monsters. Standing still for a while, Dongs quietly released his heart net, which is his domineering aura at this stage. Step by step, it slowly covered the entire dojo, but carefully avoided the living room where Kojiro received guests. Dongs is very clear that sometimes, the more you know, the faster you will die, because your ability is not enough, and knowing more things is not necessarily a good thing. Suddenly, Dong's heart beat violently in his left chest. He found Kuina in that deserted warehouse.